Hi, I'm Bill Arnold. Thank you for listening to this podcast. There are many more podcasts available at myfaithradio.com. Your support makes this possible. Thank you. And now for the guy that didn't go to broadcasting school in the event you couldn't tell.
Oh, don't you know, it's the Bill Arnold Show. It's Bill.
And a warm welcome to the Bill Arnold Show. So glad you joined me today. And my guest today, I could have booked on looks alone. One of those guys.
You're really trying to get him buttered up.
Oh, of course
I am
on
the show here, huh?
Of course I am, because I'm always glad when he comes on. He's got his own busy schedule, but he's made time for me today. Pastor Mike Novotny, welcome.
This is the most interesting introduction I've ever had. So, thank you.
Do you ever have nerves? Do you ever have a nerve issue, whether you're getting up to preach or you're going to be on TV or radio? Do you ever battle nerves?
Yeah, my hands are sweating right now.
Oh, good. I figured.
Talking to when my kids found out I was talking to Bill Arnold today, they were kind of freaking out.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know you're kind of joking, but also there is a certain energy that comes with sort of feeling a little bit of nervousness.
Yeah, I like it. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to talking about our subject today. Even though it's kind of a tough one, we're going to talk about stress and anxiety and even maybe talk about depression a little bit. So not an easy topic, but I know a lot of people have got issues with all of them.
Yeah, for sure. Kind of my philosophy on life and ministry is that not talking is not helping. So there's some stuff that's awkward and uncomfortable and complicated and nuanced, but I think the worst thing that we can do is let those things kind of scare us into silence. So I'm glad we're talking about this today, and I respect you for bringing it on the table. Well,
you're the one that is going to help get us through this hour. So let's just talk a little bit about stress. Let's define what it is, what it looks like, and you are saying that it makes us strong. That's very interesting.
Yes. So I had this moment. I've always been like a pretty slender, eat whatever I want, have the seventh piece of pie while everyone else shakes their head. And I always remember when I was in my 20s and 30s having these like older guys in their 50s saying, you just wait. They just love to pounce every time I would eat dessert. Like, you wait until you get to be my age and you won't be able to do that. And I always thought like, oh, listen to these old guys. But then I get into my 40s. So I'm 45 right now. And like early last year, I remember like looking in the mirror one day and just saying, oh no. I'm not sure the right word to use. Things were gravity was my enemy in that moment. And I came to realize that the wisdom I've been hearing for all these years, especially for middle-aged guys, is that if you don't stress your muscles, you are in a world of hurt as you get older. That it won't just come, you won't naturally be strong. A little bit of that youthful vigor starts to fade. So you can't go for just a nice, gentle walk. You can't binge Netflix and take a nap. You literally have to, what doctors call, put your muscles through a muscle fiber micro trauma.
Yes.
You have to stress them. So you have to pick up the weights that are so heavy that it burns and you hate it and you want to put it down. You're sweating and you're gasping and you're hoping it's the last set. But that's literally the way that God made our bodies so that they stay strong.
Mm-hmm. And
kind of what I've learned about character and faith is that it's the same. We all wish if you showed up on Sunday, sang your 4 favorite Christian worship songs, took notes in your nice Bible journal and went home, you'd have a great faith. But it turns out that patience, forgiveness, strength, endurance, these amazing qualities that we all want as Christians, they don't come that easily. My Bible's open right now to Romans 5, where Paul says, we glory in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance produces character, and character produces hope. So yeah, that's Paul's big idea. I'd summarize it with the simple phrase, it's stress that makes your faith strong.
Mm-hmm. My doctor talks about selective pressure instead of selective pleasure. So to make sense out of that statement I just made, let's say you want to watch the hockey game tonight, which I plan on doing. selective pressure would be every time a commercial comes on, I'll get up and do 10 deep knee bends and then sit back down on the couch. Selective pleasure would be I don't get up off the couch ever until the game's over. So choose selective pressure over selective pleasure.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, it just has me rethinking my own prayer life. It's pretty interesting. I tend to pray for an easy, comfortable life and for a great faith at the same time.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's what most of us do. And I think, if God is like a spiritual trainer who wants us to be spiritually fit and like Jesus Christ, I just picture him shrugging, saying, "Well, pick one. I can,
Right.
I can give you the comfort, or I can give you a great faith." But this Romans 5 passage, I think it really helps me appreciate, like, don't just try to survive the difficult times when there's interpersonal conflict with a family member or someone at church, when there's something to forgive because you've been wronged. I think our instinct, and it's not a bad one, is to just want the bad stuff to be over fast. Let's get back to a nice, easy life. But, what if the way that God grows us and makes us stronger and more like Jesus is through those times? Then I might want to pray, not just God end it, but God use it. God, don't let me waste this moment. Because, man, I've learned, especially as I think about like interpersonal stuff, so much of my pride gets dealt with when people aren't 100% happy with me.
I'll say more about that, Mike. That's super interesting.
Yeah. I find that passages like everyone should be slow to speak and quick to listen and slow to become angry. That I rarely get better at that when everyone is applauding and clicking the thumbs up, like, and share button. It's when the criticism comes. It's when my wife says, you're not exactly the best husband in the world this week. It's when someone from church wants to talk because they're offended at something I said in a sermon. Those hard interpersonal moments, I think they force us to confront our own pride and this like subtle idea that I don't have a lot to change. Stuff's pointed out, man. It humbles me in all the right ways, so that I have to kind of own my own failures, depend on God, and change the things that he wants to change in me. So yeah, it's that interpersonal stress for me, most of all, that tends to make me strong.
Yeah, I appreciate the vulnerability, Mike. That's something that if we say to God, I want to use this opportunity and I want you to make me better through this, but on the other side of the coin, please end this as soon as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, and Paul said it that way. I love the wording of that Romans 5 passage. He said, we glory or we rejoice in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces these things. So, Paul's kind of mindset was he knew deep down in his heart that God wasn't going to waste the suffering that he went through. And so it just gave him a totally different view of it. And I'm trying to remind my own heart of that so I don't forget it. I want to know today what Paul knew back then. And then I can be excited about the good days of relief and comfort. And I can also be super hopeful about the difficult days when I'm just depending on Jesus to get me through and letting him refine me like a good piece of metal in the fire.
Mike, what do you think the best piece of counsel you can give someone who's in the middle of this horrible stress and they want it over, but you know from experience that God is doing something amazing in their life, most likely, and they just don't see it yet?
Yeah. Yeah, it's easy to look back on the other side of it and see what God is teaching you, but you're right. When you're in the middle of it and you're in the fire, you just want someone to put the fire out. I think that's where the scriptures are so helpful. Open to the first pages and see the story of Joseph in Genesis. He's sold by his brothers into slavery. He's accused of a sexual assault he didn't commit. He's rotten away in an Egyptian prison cell. But we see by the end of it, Joseph saying, what y'all meant for evil, God meant it for good, for the saving of many lives. Or open to the New Testament. Some of my favorite books of the Bible are books like Ephesians or Philippians. And to know that Paul writes those years into an unjust prison sentence, that some of our favorite scriptures, it's by grace that you've been saved through faith. Like Paul has the time and bandwidth to write some of those things because he has nowhere to go because he's stuck in this jail cell for a crime he didn't commit. Think about Jesus. He suffers so deeply on the cross, yet it was God's plan to use his suffering for the greatest glory of all, for the salvation of our souls. So I think when you're in the middle of it and you can't see how it's going to turn out, just reminding yourself that every great hero of faith suffered deeply And we have like the inspired, God-given record of how God was using those things for good. So it's like a big old book that testifies to Romans 8:28. In all things, he's working for the good of his church.
And then Jesus getting called names for eating with drunkards and tax collectors, and they said some horrible things about him.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, there's one more angle I'd love to tackle here, if that's okay with you, Bill.
Please, yeah.
Yeah, I'm a parent of two teenage daughters. My oldest daughter has 10 and a half weeks until her high school graduation. So I'm riding the roller coaster of emotions over here in Wisconsin. I read a lot on parenting. I'm trying to study as much as I can on like trends in parenting. And what I'm reading as we talk later today about like anxiety and depression is that a lot of youth mental health struggles comes from parents who refuse to let their kids suffer in stressful situations. That a generation ago, what might have been instinctive for me and you, our mom drops us off at the mall, we take off on our bike through the neighborhood. We had to face stressful situations without a phone in our pocket or a parent by our side.
Right.
And so there were small amounts of stress that we had to figure out. And now, just because we love our kids, we want to keep them safe. Sometimes we keep them in this little cocoon or bubble where they don't have to figure that, they can chat GPT it and there's an answer. They can call dad up on the cell phone and say, what do I do? And I think because of that, it's almost like our love and protective nature can actually set our kids up for mental health struggles in the future. So some of the big trends that I'm seeing from even like secular people are, of course, be careful with social media. It's probably wise not to get your 9-year-old a smartphone and put that crazy world in their pocket just yet. But one of the other big things some experts like Jonathan Haidt are recommending is put your kids back into slightly dangerous situations. let them fall out of a tree and break their arm. Drop them off and say, I'll see you at dinner time. So I think the stress makes you strong is not just true for grownups going through suffering or battling chronic pain, but it's true for the kids that we want to be strong in the future. So I know there's a balance here and there's a tension to hold, but I just want to put that on every mother and father's heart. Like, don't be too protective, or you're going to set your kid up for some pretty big mental health battles in their future.
And Mike, if your daughter is going to have her heart broken or some big disappointment in her life, don't you want that to happen when she's living under your roof?
Yeah, although tell me the name of the boy that did that to her, because I have a big old King James Bible here. I'd like to...
Right. Maybe she didn't make the team she wanted to make, or she didn't get the part in the play she wanted, and she comes home heartbroken. I think those are character building when it happens under your roof because you help her in those times. Yeah, absolutely. And maybe stress makes you strong isn't message number one. We want to weep with those who weep and show the compassion of God to our hurting friends and family in those moments. So I don't mean to be too overly tough about it. There's a tenderness here too. But yeah, you're right. Let them struggle, be there by their side, just like God is by ours. And day by day, they're going to get stronger in their faith. Yeah. We're going to take a short break and be right back with Pastor Mike Novotny. You may know him from A Time of Grace, which is here right on Faith Radio. We're going to be right back in just a few minutes. It is my deepest desire that you take the very first step of faith by placing your faith and trust in Jesus Christ. If you've got questions about what it means to begin a relationship with Jesus, text the word faith to 41224. Pastor Mike Novotny is my guest. You may know him from Time of Grace, heard right here on Faith Radio. We're talking about stress today, and Mike, you said that stress makes you strong, but you also say that too much stress makes you weak. Say more about that. Yeah. Let's go back to the gym. So if if I can bench, let's just say 100 pounds for the sake of simplicity, it's pushing me a little bit to get in 6 to 8 reps. That's great. But if I think, therefore, let's put 500 pounds on this bar. If stress makes you strong, a lot of stress will make me really strong. And the fact is, no, it will crush my throat and send me to the hospital. So it's a little bit of a metaphor for life, right? Mm-hmm. That enough stress will stretch you and grow you, but too much stress can crush you. It makes me think about maybe 10 years ago, I was sitting in a marriage counselor's office with my wife,
And Kim and I were trying to figure out why, like, what was wrong with us? Why do we keep having the same argument every 2 or 3 months? And we're kind of, digging into the schedules and stuff. And I don't think what I realized in that moment, sitting in the counselor's office, was just how many hugely stressful things we were dealing with. 2007, I became a pastor for the first time. So my ministry kind of kicked off, and, good stress that comes. You don't quite know what you're doing. You want to serve God's people well. 2008, we have our first kid. 6 months later, we're pregnant again. Whoops. That was not the plan. So we got 2 kids in 15 months in diapers. I would say right after that time, kind of my honeymoon phase at the church I was serving wore off, and the people who liked me really liked me, and the people who didn't really didn't. Some pretty tough criticism. A lot of it, honestly, I probably deserved. Some of it I felt I didn't. One Reformation Day, I was a pastor at a Lutheran church. A woman, to honor Martin Luther's 95 Theses, wrote me a letter called 95 Complaints About Pastor Mike.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that happens. Then my parents, who, man, I grew up pretty financially well off. My dad was a successful business owner in Green Bay, Wisconsin. It was the kind of real estate crash of 07, 08. My parents went bankrupt. The bank foreclosed on their house, so my parents moved into our basement. So I'm a new pastor going through a tough season at work. We have 2 kids in diapers. Kim and I are struggling to find time to each other. We're navigating the situation with my parents. And, looking back now, I just wanted to say to like my prior self, duh. Like, of course it was breaking you. You had 500 pounds of weight and you couldn't push it back. So, there's some times in life when we can't control the amount of stress. So much stuff happens to us and not by us. And we just got to get through it with the supernatural help of God. But I've kind of realized, and I'm not sure if you've experienced this, that a lot of the times in my life when I'm overly stressed are not like that experience. There's a baby, you have to care for your family. A lot of it is like the pace that I pick, the amount of things that I say yes to. As I look at my schedule, I realize, man, no one put a gun to my head and said, you have to do this. Mm-hmm. That very often we kind of foolishly add more things, just assuming God's going to give us more time and energy. But sometimes that exaggerated stress kind of breaks us, and we end up being kind of not the version of ourselves that we want to be, not patient, not gentle, not interruptible. We lack the fruit of the Spirit, and we don't look as much like Jesus as we hope.
That's, again, Mike, that's quite a story. Looking back, with all that was going on, with your parents moving into your house, 2 young kids, you and your wife both working, I imagine, 100 hours a week. What did you learn? What did you walk away with saying, this is what God taught me in that time?
Yeah, I'd say 2 things. I mean, one, it just was a unique season. So I don't know there would have been a relaxing way to get through those years. And anyone who has 1 kid in diapers, much less 2, knows that to be true. I think my wife and I really should have looked at the amount of hours we were putting in at work. I was a pastor who's probably working 50 to 55 a week. That was kind of my schedule. My wife was a preschool director and full-time teacher. During the school year, she was probably working 60 hours a week.
Oh, boy.
And I think when I look at that and what I know about life now is that, we were just trying to be faithful servants of the church. She was trying to be a great teacher. We were trying to be great parents. And we've just learned that love takes time. And if you try to love too many people in too many ways, you end up not loving people as well as you want to. So I think we made some strategic decisions, especially in the last 5 years, to just kind of rethink our work-life balance, as, stereotypical as that sounds. And wow, some of those old arguments we used to have, it turns out there wasn't something wrong with me or with Kim. There was something wrong with our schedule, and that too much stress was making our marriage weak. A great passage in Luke chapter 5, this blows my mind. It says, news about Jesus spread all the more, so that crowds of people came to hear him and to be healed of their sicknesses. Next sentence, but Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. And to me, that's crazy. Crowds of people are coming, number one, to hear him, which is great. They actually want to hear the message about the kingdom of God. And number 2, to be healed of their sicknesses. And instead of saying, so Jesus just stayed until the last person was served, Luke tells us no, but Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. So to me, that is such amazing permission that if you need to step away from the crowds, if there are needs that you single-handedly can't meet because you're limited in time and space, it is not sinful, it is not selfish, it is not unchristian if Jesus Christ himself often did it.
Mike,
yeah.
are pastors people pleasers for the most part, or are they just responding to the call that God's put on their life, or a mixture of both?
Oh, man. Yes. And yes.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think we're all different. I mean, I know I'm wired I want to make people happy. I want to be faithful to the calling that Jesus has given. I think we struggle with that idea of self-care, that it does feel selfish. I mean, Jesus said, whatever you do for the least of these, you do for me. So, there are enough passages that say work hard, grind it out. Ministry can be difficult. John the Baptist lost his head. You're probably not going to feel like this is an all-inclusive gig. So I think if we get imbalanced and we read all of those passages and we miss the passage that I just quoted, yeah, you end up in this overextended, man, people think you're a great pastor, but your spouse and children don't think you're such a great family man. So we really have to balance all the scriptures instead of picking and choosing one or two that lead us to these unhealthy places.
Mm-hmm. Did you have friends that would say, Mike, you got to get some more rest? And how do you build those boundaries when you have every hour of every day accounted for?
Yeah. So when I was just finishing seminary, my home pastor gave me the best advice. And honestly, a lot of people give me a lot of advice, but as I look back, if you'd say, Mike, pick one thing that has changed the trajectory and quality of your life, it would be this. My home pastor said, hey, Mike, when you go to your first church, wherever that is, in the world, in the country, I want you to go to your first church leadership, church council meeting and ask everyone in the room how many hours you should work. And I told my pastor, that is the worst. That is the worst piece of advice you could ever. What do you mean? I'm not going to go in as the brand new pastor and say, hey, what's the minimum requirement so y'all don't get mad at me? And he said, no. He said, he's like, everyone's going to have an expectation of the places you should be at, the events you should attend. They're not going to express that. They're going to assume that. And if you don't clarify that from the start, you could work 100 hours and you'd be disappointing someone. So you just get on the same page. Just ask the leaders of your church what faithfulness to the call looks like. So 2007, I get to my first church leadership meeting, and I take my pastor's dare and his advice.
Mm-hmm.
And I phrased it this way. I said, I want to be a great pastor at this church. And I want to have the kind of marriage that I don't have to hide from the congregation, but hopefully it's an example to this congregation. I want my wife to love this church and its leadership team as much as I hope to. I want my children to love organized religion because it didn't take their dad from them 100% of the time. I said, I want to have a great faith life. I don't want to fake it. When I get up to preach, I want that to be out of the overflow of the relationship I actually have with Jesus. And so I just went around the room to the group of men that were there, and I said, how many hours do you think you could work at your job and still feel really good about your life as a Christian, your life as a spouse, and your life as a parent? And, oh man, Bill, to their credit, these men, they picked a number. We went around the room, and we kind of took the average of the numbers that they shared, and we said, this is what faithfulness is going to look like. And of course, there are going to be weeks when there's emergencies and you serve God's people, but I don't have to, it can push me if I'm tempted to laziness, and it can pull me back if I'm overextended.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been a pastor now for 18 years, and that schedule that they helped me create and born out of the wisdom that my pastor gave it's made me feel so good. As my daughter's about to graduate high school, it would kill me, man. It would kill me to say I missed it. And I know Jesus would be gracious, and he forgives parents who get it backwards. But it is such a beautiful thing that I'm getting ready to send my kid out of the nest and say, thank you, God, for that wisdom that helped me to be balanced like Jesus, that I could serve the church well, do my job and my calling well, and then come home and not feel guilty like I'm sinning in some way or being selfish, but I'm loving the people that God put in my care and under my roof.
Mike, you framed that beautifully to the elder board. That I've never heard anything quite so eloquent. How much do you want me to work? because I want to do life well. I want to not be hiding my marriage and family issues from the church family. I want to get up and preach from the overflow. That's brilliant.
Yeah. Thank you. I don't remember scripting that. That was like one of those Holy Spirit moments where, like, looking back, like, yes, I like how that came out, and I don't know how it came out besides God. So
yeah, it set the course, though, didn't it?
It really did. I'm kind of a nerdy tracker too, so I kind of write down how many hours I'm working, and it just has been so good for me. Because but pastors, we don't have the same, like there's a manager looking over your shoulder from 9 to 5.
Mm-hmm.
So some pastors are workaholic people pleasers. Some are lazy, and they can dink away in the office and not show up, and there's no one to look over their shoulder. So I think it was just a good boundary for me to be faithful without being foolish.
When you're writing your messages and preparing sermons, is it helpful for you to take a break and go on a 30-minute walk? And in the midst of that 30-minute walk or the workout at the gym, the idea comes to you, the exact idea that you needed to help move the sermon forward?
Yes and no.
Okay.
When I'm at the gym, no, my body is screaming at me and I don't have time to think about anything.
Okay.
But yeah, you're right. When I'm on a walk, like studying the scriptures, this probably happens to people who aren't pastors too. God puts a seed, and then sometime when your brain has room to just think,
yes,
like it just grows into something beautiful.
Yeah. I think that's what I was trying to get at, is when your brain has room to think is when you get a lot of your inspirational ideas and creative ideas for building the sermon and illustrations and all of that. So it's very interesting. All right, Mike, let me take a short break. Pastor Mike Novotny is my guest. We'll be right back in just a minute. I'm back with Pastor Mike Novotny. We're talking about stress, too much stress. We need rest from our stress. Mike, let's talk a little bit about anxiety and how important it is to allow the Holy Spirit and the Trinity to calm our anxiety.
Yeah. I'm not sure if anxiety's been a big struggle for you in your life, Bill. It hasn't been overly so for me. But in my family, among my group of friends, and especially at our church, just seeing people who are just plagued by that constant, like almost like smoke alarm in their mind.
Mm-hmm.
And if someone's listening, and I mean, they know that feeling where it just feels like everyone else in the room is okay, and you are thinking, what if this happens, and what if that happens, and this is all going to go wrong, and little things are big things, and common mistakes become, I can't forgive myself for this. So yeah, that is just such an overwhelming moment, and it feels like statistically it's happening to more and more people, even within the church. So yeah, I love that we're tackling this topic today.
I sometimes wonder how to shut off the fire alarm in your brain, because I'll do sometimes what is called awfulizing, where I'll take a scenario and I'll project it into the future. Then I'll create a story of what the outcome might be, and then it almost shuts you down that day. And you're not trusting God at all. You're assuming maybe this could happen in the future, and then it's kind of paralyzing. So I've had to work on that much of my life.
Wow. Besides everyone else, you are the only one who does that.
I know. That's what I heard. That's what I heard.
Yeah, that is so common, huh? It's just like one little, just snowballs in our brains so quickly. So yeah, I love that we're opening the scriptures. Let's give people some really practical ways to fight that.
Well, let's talk about how about less panic and more peace? That's going to resonate with a lot of people today.
Yeah. So I had a chance to interview a lot of people in our church who battle anxiety, and then 3 or 4 professional Christian counselors who attend our congregation. And something that I learned that, 20 years ago, I would have felt like it was a bit not Christian enough, but now I'm a huge proponent of it, is the idea of deep breath. So as I study the way that, in the beginning, God created, and the Psalms say that God knit us together in our mother's womb, that, really, if you're a creationist, you should care so deeply about biology and the way that your body works. And what I came to discover is that, we have this fight or flight system built within us that, our brains kind of trigger this response. And there are these nerves that go down into our heart and our lungs and our stomach. Our heart pumps faster. our body starts to sweat so we can kind of cool down if we have to run from some danger. So this is this like false alarm thing that happens, right? Your palms get clammy, your mind is racing, you can't think, your stomach hurts because your digestive system is shut off. What I've learned that's super helpful is that deep breathing, like intentional, really slowly in through your nose, holding it, and out through your mouth, is a way to tell your created body that you don't have to fight and you don't have to take flight. If you would have asked me in seminary, I probably would have said, "Wow, that's some like Eastern religion, like yoga kind of stuff." And I've realized, like, no, the first page of the book that I think is holy, the Bible, says that God created us, and if we can tap into that creative system to calm down our bodies and our brains, there's nothing like new agey about that. It's deeply Christian. So I'd actually start there. It's actually hard to think about a Bible passage and meditate on God's truth if your thoughts like can't think because your body's in this fight or flight state. So I think almost, I want to say this cautiously, almost before you pick up your Bible, you should breathe. Or as you're reaching for your Bible, you should breathe, because you have to think about the things in the Bible, and it's really hard to think unless you first decided to breathe.
I think I have 2 or 3 breathing apps on my phone, and they guide me well through, a period of 5 or 10 minutes of breathing, where you can determine how many seconds you have on the inhale and then the pause and the exhale, and it's really pleasant, and it does help me, and it does calm my body down.
Yeah, we live in a smartphone world, right?
Yeah,
so
take advantage of that. There's some great apps, and they're all free. I mean, the ones I have are free anyway, and they're really good, and they help.
Yeah, that's a great place to start. Good deep breath.
Yeah, I think sometimes we overlook that. Sometimes when you realize you're feeling sluggish, you might just even be a little dehydrated. You might need more water. I mean, there's all kinds of things that we need to pay attention to that I think people overlook.
I interviewed a woman from our church, amazing faith, and she's battled anxiety for a good chunk of her life. And she said what helped her recover and improve were 4 things: eating, sleeping, moving, and God. So it wasn't prayer, Bible, church, worship music.
Right.
So much of her recovery from anxiety was physical. God was a huge part of that. And I would actually say God is part of the physical part too. So eating like God intended our bodies to eat, sleeping as much as God intended us to sleep, and moving like God intended us to move. These are some great ways that the Trinity can help with our anxiety. Yeah,
and I would also say get some sunshine, get some vitamin D on your skin and in your eyes, and that will help reset your melatonin, and you'll sleep better at night.
And here in the Midwest, there's like 7 days when we can actually do that.
There's 4, Mike. There's 4.
Oh, 4. I'm sorry.
So let's keep talking about calming ourselves down. There's certain anxieties that we have, and when we take them to the Lord, where we're supposed to take all thoughts captive to God, how do we leave them there? Because we have a tendency of saying, "Lord, here are my anxious thoughts," then we walk away and we're still holding on to them.
Yeah, I learned from the Bible, there's that famous verse, I think it's in 1 Peter 5, that says, "Cast all your anxiety on God because He cares for you." I learned that the Greek word there, to cast on, is only used in 2 spots in the whole New Testament. It's there, and it's in the story of Palm Sunday, when the people cast their cloaks on the donkey for Jesus to ride on. And that really struck me, right? They didn't like throw half of their cloak on the donkey and then keep one arm in one of the sleeves, like half and half. It was totally, the cloak got totally off of them and totally onto the donkey. And so that idea that God wants us to, totally cast away these fears. And I think the answer, and I'm not saying that any of this is easy ever, but I think the answer in that verse is because He cares for you. So if I remember when I'm battling anxiety, that God, who loves and forgives and saves and cleanses and also controls, is sovereign, is on a throne, if that God is my God, I don't have to be anxious about, am I going to make it to heaven? Does God love me? Does God like me? Does He forgive me? The cross of Jesus declares that all those things are true. It deals a catastrophic and deadly blow to my deepest spiritual anxieties. And then if I remember that Jesus didn't just die, but He rose as the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, that He is reigning in this moment at the right hand of God, and all the things I'm freaking out about are underneath His sovereign feet, I hope it doesn't sound like too pastoral or theological, but the death and resurrection of Jesus, I think, is the ultimate answer to our deepest fears.
Mm-hmm.
Is God for me, and is God in control of my future for my good? And the cross and the empty tomb say yes and yes.
Mike, do you think the body of Christ is getting better or worse at the one another verses?
Oh, man.
I mean, in some areas, we're all over helping, caring, loving people. And in other areas, we're slightly more detached. And I don't know if I should get involved, or this seems really messy for me. And so there's kind of a balance going on for people.
Yeah, I think mental health struggles are complicated because sometimes when you want to help, you find out that help doesn't happen as quickly as you'd like to.
Mm-hmm.
One of the counselors I interviewed deals with depression himself. And he said, you really have to learn to get comfortable with uncomfortable emotions.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, hey, my friend is anxious. I'm going to quote 1 Peter 5 and buy them coffee. And now they'll never be anxious again.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like anxiety and some of these feelings are just like our battles with jealousy or envy or pride or anger. And it's a marathon journey. So I think we're finding out, especially with mental health, that actually loving another human being is this marathon and not this quick sprint. And in a busy world where we spend a lot of time scrolling instead of like face to face with people,
Mm-hmm.
it's really hard to squeeze in real healing with a fellow human. So do I think we're getting I think we're getting more aware of how to help with mental health struggles, but I think that the busy pace of our life maybe backfires on us. So yeah, I'm feeling that tension that you brought up.
Well, just getting comfortable with someone's discomfort is challenging. And I would imagine for a pastor like you who has a flock that you are over, and then you've got radio show and TV and everything else you're doing, how much margin do you have?
Yeah, well, that's a real question.
I'm not saying it's your responsibility, but I'm just saying I bet a lot of people come to you because they love you and go, I bet Mike will help me. And your desire would be, yes, I do want to help you, but there's a lot on your plate.
Yeah, I've kind of learned as things grow, and I feel this is true of a church or a family, that really everyone needs to play their part.
Mm-hmm.
So, what I found with a lot of counseling at my church is that the special training I have, I had to take like 7 years of Hebrew classes to read the Old Testament that most people don't come and say, Pastor, I'm really stumped by this verb from Isaiah 51. Like most of the time, people just need love, a listening ear, reminders of the very basics about God's love and power. And that I think 99% of God's people in the church are totally qualified for that kind of care. So I think we bottleneck and don't grow if we think that all roads have to lead through the pastor's office. I say that all the time with confession when, maybe not just anxiety, but when people are struggling with a sin, the devil somehow convinces us like we can't talk to other people from the church about these things. And just my experience in our church has been, wow, God's people are great. They're not perfect, but a lot of times they're really great. They like listen, they care, they pray, they help, they check in, they forgive, they point me back to the cross. So I don't know. Maybe it's the devil's trick because he doesn't want to see you get healed. To think that unless you're seeing a professional counselor or you have a visit with the pastor, you're not going to see a breakthrough or growth or get anything good. And I would just like embrace the family of God and all the sons and daughters that God has been equipping for moments just like this to love one another and to carry each other's burdens.
Yeah. You're clearly on a roll, but Wyatt wants to take a break, so I guess I have to answer to him.
Oh, you're going to blame me, huh?
I'm going to blame you.
I mean, it's kind of true. I do think we need to go to break.
Yeah, you keep looking at me like, break, so I guess we're going to break. All right, Mike, we'll be right back. Mike Novotny is my guest. We're going to continue our discussion about stress, anxiety, and I think when we come back, we're going to talk about depression a little bit. We'll be right back. Welcome is a word said universally all over the world. Every language on the planet has their own way of making a friendly greeting. At Faith Radio, when we welcome, we really mean it. Learn more about us by requesting a free welcome pack gift. Text the word WELCOME to 877-933-2484 or visit myfaithradio.com to request your welcome pack today. And a warm welcome to you. My guest is Pastor Mike Novotny. During the break, Mike, I was thinking about the word remember. Oftentimes, I need to be reminded. I need to remember what God has done for me and how much He loves me and cares about me and knows the details of my future from beginning to end. Sometimes I don't need new counseling information. I just need to be reminded of who He is.
Yeah, amen to that.
Yeah.
I think in Philippians 3, Paul said, it's no trouble for me to write the same things to you again because they are a safeguard for you. So, yep, you've heard this before, Philippians. I'm going to say it again because that's going to keep your heart and your soul safe from these common temptations and fears.
Let's talk about depression. I know this is my least favorite of stress, anxiety, and depression, but there are a lot of people that have this is a serious concern.
Yeah. I just got done reading a book called Spurgeon's Sorrows.
Mm-hmm.
It was about the great 19th century preacher Charles Spurgeon. A few people might know the story. He was just a rocket of a superstar in the church world. He was 22 years old. I think he had outgrown church after church after church. And he was preaching in front of, 10,000 people in London when someone tragically thought it would be funny to yell the word fire in the middle of his service. And the people stampeded towards the doors, and 7 people were killed. They got trampled at the church service itself. And Spurgeon, from that moment, spiraled into like a brutal depression. He said, "My spirit sank so low that I could weep by the hour like a child, and yet I knew not what I wept for."
Mm.
And this guy who loved Jesus so deeply, who believed in the cross and the empty tomb, he battled until the day of his death with the darkness of depression. So, yeah, you can love God and struggle with these hopeless thoughts. You can deal with this like juxtaposition of darkness and light, of Jesus and mental health struggles. And it's not just a Spurgeon thing. When I open my Bible and kind of look at it through a mental health lens, I realize, wow, a lot of the major characters in the scriptures dealt, I think, with what we would call depression. Moses was so depressed by the burden of leadership, he wanted God to end his life. Elijah was so depressed, he deceived himself into thinking he was the only true believer left on earth. Job, man, in some of his darker moments, cursed the day of his birth. Jesus was called a man of sorrows. Paul said that he despaired of life. King David said he flooded his couch and his bed with tears in his sadness and depression. So I just want to say, if you battle depression, you are by far not the first. You won't be the last. And God has some pretty powerful ways of ministering to his sons and daughters in the midst of our sadness.
In those dark times, I think that's when God pours out some incredible grace and mercy. And if you can understand what's going on in your life in that moment, you probably will look back with incredible gratitude, not for what happened, but for the way in which God brought you through it.
Yeah, he's so faithful that way. It strikes me, we're the depth of Jesus' sufferings. And if you remember when Jesus prays in the garden outside of the city of Jerusalem, and he says things like, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death.
Mm.
And Jesus, God in human flesh, says to his bumbling friends, stay here and keep watch and pray with me. So yeah, this is so stunning to me. Our God knows what it's like to be overwhelmed with sorrow. Jesus himself knows exactly what it's like to need people because you're in such an overwhelming place, spiritually, emotionally, and mentally. So asking for help, asking for prayer, saying to loved ones or your church family, I'm overwhelmed with sorrow. There's nothing unchristian about that.
No.
If Jesus Christ said it first.
So when you have someone that says time and time again, I'm in this depression, I'm in this place of despair, is there a season where you go, you're still talking that way 10 years later? Is that something that's just gone wrong, or how do you encourage someone? Because we all know people like that.
Yeah, it's so tough. I've seen, part of my job is to know a lot of Bible passages, and that when someone's really depressed, it's almost like this shield that every time you try to give good news and truth and hope, they pick up the shield and block it.
Interesting.
And that can get really frustrating. Like I'm trying to remind you of the light of God's love and give you some hope with the promises of God. But sometimes people just aren't in that state. So it is, I mean, let's not minimize this as some quick fix. This is a tough journey. Depression can come and go. Sometimes it just comes and stays. So we really have to have that kind of long suffering, patient, enduring love for a person in that place, just like God has with us. So just if you or someone you love battles it, just rid yourself of that deception and that assumption that I'm going to say the right thing and make this all better. For Charles Spurgeon, who, man, had the Bible in his hands every day, this was a long journey, and for some of us it will be too.
Yeah, the Prince of Preachers had an issue with depression. And of course, I want to split the difference between situational depression and biochemical depression. Those are two different things, but...
Yeah, 1,000%. I would say too, the Bible doesn't talk a ton about this, so I want to be a little cautious, but if I broke my leg, you wouldn't judge me for a second if I went to the doctor and had a surgery and got a cast. When something breaks kind of chemically in our brains, there's nothing unchristian or weak or unbiblical about reaching out to a doctor and considering medication. I've seen that in my own family, just the power of a good medication to kind of take that edge off so you can use the good spiritual tools you get from the scriptures. I think we're warming up to that a lot as the church in the last generation, but it's just really good for us to say out loud, it's not a sign of weakness. My daughters like to say in school, you got to use all your resources, Dad.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think there's friends, there's pastors, there's scriptures, there's the Spirit, there's a doctor, there's counselors, there's good medication. And I really encourage all of us to use all of our resources to find our hope and our joy in Jesus.
I don't talk to a lot of pastors that enjoy talking about Psalm 88, but we have a couple of minutes left, Mike, and I'd love for you to jump in on that psalm because it is one of those psalms that ends without hope.
Yeah, almost all the other psalms, which are pretty honest about suffering, they take this turn in the middle, like, God, I cry to you day and night, but I trust in your unfailing love, but I'll sing of your goodness because you're my rock and my fortress. But Psalm 88 gets dark, and then it gets darker, and then it ends in almost total darkness.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, the last line is, darkness is my closest friend, end of song. And as difficult as that is to read, it's pretty amazing to me that the Holy Spirit inspired that psalm too.
I know.
And that the inscription of it is this is meant to be like a song of worship.
Right.
I'm trying to think if we sang that in our churches today, just learning to lament, learning to realize it's not just up and to the right.
Yeah.
It's not just part one, bad news, part two, good news. Let's sing a song of joy and go home. That life is more complicated than that. And sometimes you end your day with weeping, even if you started with a smile. So there's just a good honesty about, I think the Psalms are always great for emotional moments, but if you battle depression, meditate on Psalm 88, and I think you'll find a companion and a friend in it.
I agree. And here this Heman who wrote that is, we're still talking about him 1,000 years later.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the opening line too. I know we're ticking down on our seconds here, but even though it's so dark, the opening line is, Lord, you are the God who saves me.
Right.
So he was wrestling with God. He didn't get it all in the darkness, but he still believed this is the faithful covenant God of Israel who rescued me when I was in danger.
Yeah.
And I think we do the same thing when we're depressed. I don't understand it. I don't get it. I'm sick of it. But the God I'm praying to right now is the God who sent his son Jesus to save me.
Awesome. Mike, thanks for doing the show. Really great to have you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me back, Bill.
You bet. Pastor Mike Novotny's been my guest. Hey, I don't know if you've downloaded the Faith Radio app. Go to your app store and check it out. I have to say, it's a beautiful app. I've got mine on my iPhone, and when you download it, you just can't believe how pretty it is. And you open it up, and it's very easy to navigate your way through it. And you can listen to Faith Radio live, or you can just check out the podcast. It doesn't matter where you go. You can download if you've got that Faith Radio app. So give it a try. And if you don't like it, it's easy just to delete it off your phone, but I'm pretty sure you'll keep it. That wraps up our show for the day and for the week. Thank you for supporting Faith Radio. See you next week. Thanks for listening. Programming like this is made available through your support. Information available at myfaithradio.com.